Hello and welcome back to Revender in Sports and another edition of industry news. Let's call it a consumer safety edition as well. So a lot of you have made many comments about the Shimano cranksets that have come unbonded, and thanks Shimano, I guess, is the hashtag out there. So finally, Shimano has decided to do a voluntary inspection recall process. And so that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. Now, a couple of things on how it's supposed to work, and then some things that, like, let's say substitutions that if you had a certain model, crank arm, length, and chainring combination, and it's no longer offered in their 12-speed group set, then you're not going to have the option for that. So it's not a direct swap. This goes all the way back to 2019. I should say production dates prior to 2019. So we're 4 years, at least 4 years past that, because this covers cranksets prior to 2019, group sets that are fairly old, like a 6800 crankset, an R9000. So you're just not going to be able to get an exact replacement, right? There will be substitutions. So I'm going to walk you through how to know as a consumer, and if you're a bike shop, maybe this will shortcut the learning curve on your end from all the materials that I've received thus far. All right, the first thing you need to do is look at the cranksets that fall into this program. And of course, as soon as I need the material, my computer went to sleep. Okay, so let's talk about the cranksets that are part of this program. The 6800 Ultegra crankset. If you don't know what they look like, so that's a 6800 crankset. I don't have a 9000 off of the bike. And then this is the 9100. So we have the 6800, the 9000, the 8000, which is a fairly new, the R9100 like this with a power meter, so the P version, and then of course this one, right? So that's the first thing you need to do. Identify which one of those you own. The next thing you need to do is, let me make sure this is clean. There's going to be a code right here. And this is a live version of this, but I'm going to show you in their documentation. And there's going to be a code, a 2-letter code. In this case, this is an RE code. So this is one of the cranksets that's affected, and it's a inspection that needs to be performed by a local authorized Shimano authorized dealer. And then the dealer looks at it, submits a warranty replacement claim, and there is a check in the box of something that I want to show you as well. So actually, let's do that now so we can look at a couple of things. So apologize if I just made you dizzy with how I spun that around. So these are the 5 cranksets that are affected. Now here's the hazard, that the bonded crank arm can separate and break, right? Posing a crash. And then pre-2019 11-speed bonded cranksets, all right? And then there is an inspect, and replacement is necessary. So let's now look at the okay. So when you look at these cranksets, what you're trying to do is, you see these codes here? You're looking for that code right here on your crankset. Okay? So those models that are affected, and then look for that code in that blue box on your crankset. And these are the codes of, and you can pause this, you can take a screenshot of this, and those are the pre-2019, pre-July to be more exact, 2019 cranksets or production codes. All right, so once that's been identified, and by the way, if you don't have one of these cranksets, they are saying at this point in time, so we don't know about in the future, but at this point in time, no other cranksets are affected. So basically a flow chart. First thing, determine if your crankset needs to be inspected. Identify the model number, right? Step 1, step 1A. If your model number is not one of these, no, the crankset is not affected, no further action. But if it is, then you go to step 1B. Step 1B is, okay, I've looked at the model number, now let me see the production date. And then if the crankset is not in those production dates, then safe to use, keep going. But if it is, then you proceed to step 2, which is down here. All right. Now, step 2 is the retailer has to inspect it. And it's going to look for, is there something that looks like it's unbonded, it's beginning the process of being unbonded, and if so, then you submit it, okay? If there's nothing, if the retailer says, no, it looks fine, then there you go, right? You just keep riding. But you should be inspecting your stuff, possibly more frequently or whatever, all right? Now, what I found interesting is they have here a release of liability for the shop. So the retail partner, with every submission, will be required to check a box that releases you of liability if the proper training and procedures were followed. In other words, I've inspected your crankset, I didn't see anything, I followed the proper procedures, and then you go out and you, for some reason, the crankset becomes unbonded and you do crash and injure yourself, then, I believe that that's what they're talking about here. But when we submit the crankset, it's also holding us harmless. So it's right here, it says, and hold harmless the dealer and retailer from any blah, blah, blah. Now, but it does not apply if I was negligent in my duties, okay? A gross negligence, then this release of liability does not apply. All right, now let's get on to the substitutions. So here's the thing, and I found this interesting. So these are all 11-speed cranksets. So what they've decided to do is, okay, you have an 11-speed crankset, but we don't produce those anymore, manufacture those anymore, or at least these models. So if you had a 6800 or an 8000 crankset, you're going to get this. If you had a 9000 and a 9100, you're going to get this. And then if you had a power meter, then you're going to get this. Now, this is what's happening. The replacement cranksets use an existing 12-speed crank arm design, right? So a little bit different, I guess, than the 11-speed. To make these 12-speed crank arms work with an 11-speed drivetrain, we designed new chain rings. Okay, these new chain rings will be available, so on, so on, so on. So then they also give you another sort of disclaimer. Replacement crankset models will not have the exact cosmetic match compared to the original. It also says that in some cases, the crank arm lengths, the chainring combinations may not be available. So in these situations, they will give you something that is the closest match possible. So let's take a look at what they are going to offer. If you had a 6800 crankset or an R8000, it looks like it doesn't matter what, or maybe all the all the crank arm lengths are available. I'm not sure what this means. It's completely blacked out. But what they are saying is, if you have a 5339, what you're going to get as a replacement is a 5236. If you had a 5238 for this set of cranksets here, you're going to get a 5236. So anyone who was riding these really long crank arms of 180, they are going to get a 177.5. Okay, and if you were in the power meter cranksets here, 167, 177, so on and so forth, you're only going to get these two options. So you go from these three options to these two as a substitution. So there's going to be some bike fit opportunities for some fitters out there to work with people now that they used to have a certain crank arm length for years, and now they have to use a different crank arm length if they want to take the substitution and put it on their bike. I would imagine that most people will. And these are not dramatic changes. I mean, maybe the 180 to 175 is a little bit of a dramatic change. But this here, 180 to 177, a little bit of a saddle adjustment or something saddle height adjustment should handle that. And then these were the chainring combinations, but they are no longer going to offer that. The only chainring combination you're going to get now is a 5440. So you have an opportunity to get new crankset, but you may not get the correct crank arm length for yourself, and you may not get the chain rings that you're used to riding. Now, this is all supposed to start happening. Let me see where I found. So let's close that one because we don't need that one anymore. This one doesn't give us the dates. So we'll close that one. They did talk about, and I apologize that I'm fumbling through this. Okay, here we go. Inspection material will be available the week of the 25th. Submission of inspection results will also be available the week of the 25th. And then replacement crank arms will be available to start shipping October the 10th. So that's as much as I know about this voluntary inspection and recall. And so voluntary recall is what they're calling it for the time being. But that's as much as I know. As usual, as quickly as I can get information for you and be able to digest it before I do a video about it. Now, I'll get it out as fast as possible. Unfortunately, I had a very busy week. Some of this stuff started coming out about a day or two ago. So today is September 22nd. I feel fairly confident that I understand what's going on. So if you folks have questions, you should contact your local Shimano authorized dealer, work with them, work with your local bike shop. If you bought your stuff online, gray market or somewhere, and the QR code does not pop up as an authentic You know, because that's the other thing too. There was some counterfeiting going on during the COVID lockdown and stuff, and you know, for parts, bikes. Well, counterfeit frames have been out there for a long time, but I believe that during the COVID time, there was quite a bit of issues with other componentry, wheels and such. So anyway, always buy from a Shimano authorized dealer, preferably always from your local bike shop. Support your local bike shop, support your LBS, because that is that's your first line of defense when something like this happens. They can also contact, or they should be able to contact you. You know, just run through their point of sale system and be like, oh, anyone who's bought a Dura-Ace equipped bike, or anyone who has bought Dura-Ace cranksets from us, let's get in contact with them. It should have a filter system. You know, most point of sale systems are just one huge database. And so it's always important, and it just seems like sometimes customers don't want to provide their customer contact information, whether it be a phone number, or they give you a junk email, or an email that's, you know, used for spam when they open up an account with you, and you're like, you know, I need to be able to contact you in the future if there is a recall. And these things happen. I wouldn't say frequently, but they do happen. And as a retailer, we want to be able to get a hold of you. Okay, that's all for today. Please get a discussion going down in the comments below. And if you find value in my content, please subscribe. We're getting so close to 5,000 subscribers, and it would really make my day to see that number pop over 5,000. Okay, I think we're at, I don't know, 4980 something. So we've only need fewer than 20 subscribers. So get out there, click that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and we will see you up the road.